Howdy, listeners. We have our ongoing conversations with these couple guys I know. Well, I pretend to know them. World-famous author Patrick Jordan, author of ICD 999, Vaccine-Induced Diseases, which altered my way of thinking. Hopefully, you will have the same alterations without a needle and thread. And our friend Dr. No, who comes from us from the balmy tundra of Texas. How you guys doing, gentlemen?
The windy tundra of Texas today.
Do you have your wind turbine mounted solid and generating electricity today?
No, I have 5,000 pinwheels duct taped to the gutters.
Oh, perfect. Whatever it takes, harness the energy.
You want to know why it's windy in Texas?
Did you have gas from the grain
because
ghetto?
Chicago, Illinois sucks.
But how can it suck? Because it's a gun-free zone now. It should be the safest place on Earth.
Yeah, I never even thought of that. They call it the Windy City, and that's because it sucks.
That's what I'm thinking. I don't know if you've ever been downtown Chicago, which I have, right there on the water's edge, right next to the old Sears Tower, and just take a good inhalation breath through your nose. And if you're still standing, from the lack of oxygen and amount of methane produced by the compost that happens in that city, you're lucky.
Well, see, here's the thing. When I was a young lad, I thought that air smelled like diesel exhaust fume from buses until I got out into the grain ghetto. And when they're not spraying farm chemicals, the air actually smelled clean back in the day.
Yeah, good luck with that nowadays.
Oh, man, even right now, in the wintertime, the air smells as if I am next to an industrial foundry. And there's no industry around. There's just farm fields.
No. Farming is an industry nowadays. You got to get that right.
Oh, I'm sorry. I retract.
Don't mean to be rude, but I can't help it.
Be as rude as you want to be. Of course, it's A channel.
That's right. We can be rude as long as we're FCC compliant.
Okay.
Or is it F something else compliant? Okay, so I'm reading this book called Lab 257 by Mr. Carroll. And I've been noticing there's things like Rift Valley fever showing up a lot. So I'm into this chapter here where it explains where Rift Valley fever comes from. It comes from the Rift Valley in Africa. And how the United States Department of Agriculture, in its infinite knowledge of the control of biological agents, has acquired this among hundreds of other strains of organisms around the planet, and they've continued to weaponize them and use them openly since 1950s on the public for experiments. Can you believe that?
Oh, I'm sorry, I fell asleep. Were you saying something that was new?
Well, for the listeners, it may be new. For me, it's not new because I've known this for quite some time. I'm just reading another book to verify, my insanity isn't really insane. It's actually government-sponsored germ warfare on the public.
So what helps listeners, just the general man and woman off the street that wants to look into this stuff for themselves, it's easily done with a keyword called bioprospecting. And you really have to wonder why the United States Department of Agriculture actually goes around the world looking for exotic organisms.
We have today, I like that word exotic. It kind of makes you feel almost tingly and rainbowy and puppy dog fartish.
Oh, really? I said exotic, not erotic.
Well,
either way, I was kind of wondering how much time the FDA spent in the Gold Club in Vegas.
that depends if they have bacteria in their pocket and they're making their own gold chips right there on site. And I say that for a reason. Because Patrick, in his infinite semiconductor knowledge, made some very valuable points while he was on the Clint show about gold being produced basically as a mycotoxin. And he was making some other things. I actually listened to Pat's interviews everywhere else, so because I like Pat's information, even though he likes to poke fun at my family and my family's corruption and whatever. And so anybody that has any, you can easily find my family all over the planet. They're like parasites and pathogens. They have problems. They want to control everything, which I don't agree with. But anyhow, Patrick was talking about this bacterial excrement called gold. And I'm noticing that gold, and here I want Patrick to say this because you have way better language than and a little better grasp, because I got so many things on my mind right now. And I don't remember exactly what your dialogue about this is, but how gold and silver, platinum, palladium, and that sector of the elemental scale, elemental chart, actually hijacks the receptors on the cells and kind of fools the cells. Because I'm taking this down a path because I'm getting ready to publish a document that I'm putting together about glyphosate, and this ties right into that. So we're looking at gold and silver and platinum in that metal family. Can you explain the gold poop thing, the bacterial poop called gold, Patrick?
Long before I ever got into vaccines, I had tripped across a Reader's Digest article. Very small, like one column, like news press release in one single page of a Reader's Digest that said that most of the major gold veins, so we're talking deposits that are underground that go for extended distances, most of the major gold veins were actually laid down by bacterial action. So these microbes were digesting the soil and basically pooping out pure gold. Pure gold. That's a mind blower. So I just take that kind of stuff and I file it away. That was many years ago. Started getting into the whole vaccine thing. You can't get into vaccines without getting into healthcare. You can't get into healthcare without getting into politics. You can't get into politics without getting into, exactly how you open the show, biological and electronic warfare against the inhabitants of this planet. And so I was sent recently, and I sent it out to the list, an article that said that gold atoms, so we're beyond nanoparticles. Nanoparticles are typically a collection of, a cluster of atoms. So gold atoms, like the monoatomic, the colloidal, the ionic gold that they're tricking people into guzzling in because everybody wants to be a pharaoh's mummy. And sorry if that's part of your family too, Will.
It's okay. I still love
gold
you.
they're consuming is actually attaching to the DNA, man. It's attaching to structures on the DNA that allow then the gene that gold particle is under to be manipulated, either turned on or turned off by, get this, radio frequency. We're talking remote control people here, man.
That document that you have on your website, on your PDF page, talks about that. Biology of Aggression talks about that. The United States Department of Agriculture, in conjunction with the Army, talks about this in the 50s and the 40s. So is this new? No, not new. So what happens when the gold and the silver and these nano, ionic, whatever you want to call with these new marketing ploys attached to them, these metals. And see, this leads into what we were going to talk about. At least I thought we were going to talk about this today. This cholesterol thing is what I'm trying to bring it around, because isn't that what we want to talk about today?
Wow.
So you got to understand, though, that the metal or the bacterial excrement, or also called mycotoxins, how they interfere with cellular processes. So we're going to just, we'll talk about it, we'll break it down, and hopefully you can call in, and I don't have the number today, I'm so bad, 347 I think, but or put it in the chat room. I'll be logging into the Freedom Slips chat room here shortly, and we can expand on this. And expand on this and distill it down to where y'all understand what's going on. Dr. Noel, I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought I heard you.
That's okay. I just have a question for Mr. Jordan. Well, we want to know how long this has been going on. Well, let's rewind to King Solomon. The reason why they never found his mines, according to the alternate research, is because his gold was from the Red Sea. Whether you want to call it monatomic or whatever, the Egyptians were well aware of it. Molecular gold. And I was just wondering, because I had never heard that about the bacteria before, but since there is supposedly such a disproportionate amount of gold in the waters in that area, there's also a hugely disproportionate amount of bacteria. Could there possibly be that same connection going on there, as your Reader's Digest article suggests?
Wow, man.
Well, the Essenes, according to my research and actually following some of the alchemical information that is not readily available today from then. So maybe the mines were really like the back room of the trailer house, and they were just, farming the bacteria back there. So there was no mines. Why would you even see that? This is what I think is part of the mind virus and memes that are spread to keep people in their ignorantly bliss category of life. They equate gold with mining instead of gold with petri dishes.
Well, that's my point, is that's why they never found his mines, as in holes in the ground, because his gold came from water.
And the microbe connection is absolutely perfect, because what better media could you have to cultivate them in than a big liquid petri dish called the Red Sea?
And it's not like that, like I said, the waters of that area, it's not like they're not currently rife with bacteria. I mean, it's called the Red Sea for a reason.
Or the Dead Sea. It's in the same region.
The Dead Sea's in the same region. We have a lot of minerals concentrated in those waters, lots of bacteria concentrated in those waters. A king who had a fortune in gold that never dug a hole in the ground to get it. And now this interesting thing about the gold being the excrement of bacteria. And so, it's quite reasonable, considering the fact that we have not accounted for geologically the amount of gold above the surface of the planet appropriately for what we claim to be the known geological gold mines. So there's a whole big rabbit hole, gold leaf that you could go down here with this.
And bacterial pooped on the floor to keep it nice and soft. And what really opened my eyes to this was my uncle had a couple gold mines in Northern California. And listening to him talk about certain things and the condition and the smell down in the mine, and then watched a show about how, and I forget what show this was. It was on the regular cable. I don't know if it was History or whatever, Net Geo, whatever. They were talking about, they actually were doing soil cultures, sample cultures, to find the specific strains of bacteria to then locate gold. I'm going, oh, get out of here. Could it be that this force mutating these bacterias to actually create the gold inside people's bodies, and then the gold gets lodged like a kidney stone in your urethra and cause a backup in a cellular metabolism? Because it's not just gold. What are the other elements in that group? And I don't have my elemental scale handy, but just check that out. You got gold, platinum, palladium. We have a lot of these metals. And see, this is what really drives me nuts about the alternate natural health industry, because they're touting nano and ionic as something good, that it just goes right into your body. As soon as you put it in your mouth, it gets absorbed right into and it's such a good thing. I will say I don't agree with that philosophy, because I'm seeing a lot of sick people after years of ingesting this garbage. This, what's another word for this bacterial poop gold? This white monatomic gold.
Well, again, going back to the Egyptians who actually made bread out of it, and Solomon, the benefit of consuming this ionic gold was the fact that it did bond to your DNA. It did increase your sensitivity to the electromagnetic spectrum, and thus, since back then we're going under the assumption that, you know, the electromagnetic spectrum wasn't exactly the world of HARP and Gwen that it is today. It was used as a means for esoteric enhancement, to connect yourself to the, whatever you want to call it, the ether, I can't think of the other word now, but you know what I mean.
The auric field.
Yes, basically speaking. I mean, that's what it was used for. It was a shortcut to becoming plugged in to higher levels of consciousness and into the energy field, you know, in conjunction with, you know, some of the proposed theories on what the pyramids were for, et cetera, et cetera. But we're talking back in the days when this was an organic analog form of being plugged in, like I said, not the form of cell phones and HARP and Gwen towers that we have today. So, you know, kind of the whole thing of artificially increasing the frequency on your DNA antennas is, you know, probably not a good idea unless you want 57 channels and nothing on in your brain.
Well, here's a little clunker that I'm going to throw in the water before the break. What if this monatomic gold thing, and I'm going to throw in the same lump as these dietary choices of today with the high carbohydrates and this idea of eating carbohydrates, period, is really for the designated for the masses of people, to keep them dumbed down and aligned and complacent, and really to keep them in that state of being that you can go back into history. This is how you keep slaves. This is how you keep your workforce so they don't combat you as the overlords. I totally believe that's why wandering around in the wilderness, if you want to believe that story, for 40 years. They fed them this stuff to keep them complacent, to keep them dumbed down, and from, rising up to their individuality.
Well, actually, kind of, sort of. As I said, the Egyptians had bread, we'll call it, an unleavened bread, and that bread was made of what you refer to as monatomic or ionic gold and silver. The bread was actually made of metals, and I can never remember the name of it, but I actually know the glyph of it in Egyptian, because that's how sick I am. Now, it was well known amongst the common masses and the slaves that this particular substance brought you closer to God, gave you supernatural powers, yada, 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 yada. And there was, at one point in time, quite a bit of dissension amongst the masses, because at that point in the Egyptian culture, they weren't out and out slaves at that point. So in order to quell the masses and make them believe that they were on equal footing with the priest class, the black nobility, whatever you want to call it, the Brotherhood of the Snakes, they invented the unleavened bread made out of grain, because that was the culture that started agriculture and domesticated grain. Now, granted, the grain that they called wheat back then was a little bit different, quite a bit different than what we have now, but it was still the first time that a bread was made out of a grain, and it was done specifically to mimic the bread of the nobility that was made out of minerals.
It's a shuck and jive thing going on then. Okay, here's our first break. We'll see you back in just a couple minutes. All right, we're back. This is an alternate perspective with me, Will, and our guests, Patrick Joran and Dr. No. And don't forget, this is a listener-sponsored network, so please tap the donate button to help keep us here. We do have a call-in number, 347-688-2902. And we are also being simulcast on Wolf Spirit Radio. Thank you, Dave, and the crew over there, wolfspiritradio.com, as well as that is also a listener-sponsored network. Okay, so here we go. Back on the direction of this bacterial excrement called gold. Because there's a reason I brought this up. And Patrick wanted to, I want Patrick to talk anymore if he wants to talk anymore, because we're going to go down this, and ultimately going to end up, hopefully, with this cholesterol issue. Can you?
That's the part that fascinates me. I'm really waiting to find out how you're going to tie it all together. I have more things to add, but this really intrigues me.
Okay, so you want me just to spit it out, and then we'll go from there.
No, I want you to draw out people's expectations, because I got more boring facts to throw out there.
Oh,
so farm to death, and then you can whack them in the head with a board and wake them up.
Okay, I'm going to get my oar out, and we're going to start whacking melons. Because this show has what's the title of the show, right? It's called An Alternate Perspective. This is a different...
Okay.
It's called what?
I thought it's called Bug Poo. Oh, you mean the show, not the episode of the show?
Yeah. Yeah, this is the actual name of the show, An Alternate Perspective, because I am honored that I have not been totally mind-warped by the industrial education systems. I have a component within me that I nurture, which I'm thankful to my father, who encouraged me not to do well in public school and actually signed my get-out-of-school pass very frequent so I can come and work with him and not be subjected to the complete and utter brainwashing of the institutional education system. So thank you, Dad. Now, bacterial excrement, mycotoxins, gold.
Tell me more about the smell in the mines. That fascinates me.
It's kind of like going down into your basement after it leaked and you got a foot of water in there, and then a month later it warms up, the spring comes, and now you got this musty smell. There's actually odors you can smell with your nose that are the odor. It's kind of like driving by one of these confinement feedlot operations. You can tell if it's a pig, a chicken, a turkey, or a cattle operation before you can see it. Because we are gifted with these receptors that pick up the odor that you can't see. But you see, nowadays, people's smells are altered because the receptors on the cells inside your nose are polluted. They're congested. They don't work correctly. So a lot of these smells people miss. So I want to get back to the cellular receptor. Here, everyone needs to watch Bruce Lipton. Okay, I have his video on my website, bodyelectrician.com. You go to the Media and Information tab, and it's one of the first couple of videos there. It's Bruce Lipton, 2011. He talked in Oslo. Is it Oslo in Germany or something? It's in Europe. He was in Europe talking to this group of college people about these bacteria and viruses and fungi in the environment, and there's no such thing as infectious diseases because it's everywhere. And he has pictures of the cell. I mean, these are big models that you can actually visualize the cell. And the cell, let's pretend it's like a basketball. And each little, or a golf ball, each little dimple on the outside of the ball is one of those receptors. And when that receptor gets clogged with something that's not aligned specifically by nature with that receptor then becomes short-circuited or hijacked. And Patrick made a very good point a long time ago on the shows, I'm talking over a year ago, regarding the metals. When they get put or attracted into these receptors because of the other minerals that are supposed to be there, when they're gone, it kind of hijacks that receptor. It's kind of like what happens in the semiconductor industry when they get the wrong metal in the chip. The chip doesn't work, and they have to recall the chips, and then they got to smelt the chips down, separate all the metal, clean all the different elements, and then they reform the chip again. It's exactly the same way in our body. So most people don't smell this mildewy stuff because they've got so much of this bacteria in their own sinus cavities that shut down their own receptors that they can't even distinguish the difference. Because the pathogenic state in the environment is actually inside of them also. That's how ill the population is in general. And see, I'm saying this for some reasons. Because your body and your cells are corrupted and distorted and overloaded with metals and overloaded with mycotoxins, and your body is overloaded with these pathogens. Your perspective, your view of life is altered because your receptors, those little electrical signals, are not making it through the receptor like they're supposed to be. So then when you're living in an environment that's saturated with pollution of these EMFs, these synthetic man-made frequencies in the environment, you then are corrupted. Your body processes do not work properly. You are now malleable to the system. You are now disconnected from nature. And now you are susceptible to what the EMFs are, the synthetic ones in the environment are now hijacked your central nervous system, your endocrine system, your digestive system, your peripheral nervous system. Because your cells, those little receptors, have been basically turned off to the natural world and turned on to the synthetic world, all before your eyes, and you can't even see it. And then enter into the environment rabies, HPV, AIDS, Rift virus, hantavirus, adenovirus, and a whole list of things that are responding to the EMFs, they're responding to the synthetic environment, and you wonder why you can't stop eating carbohydrates? You wonder why you have to go to the doctor? You wonder why you then think that I'm nuts? Because you don't have a choice. Because you're corrupted. Your cells have been hijacked. You can't see this unless you have a very good microscope, or you can see things the way I see things on a frequency level. And you wonder why your mind is not your own, like the song says. You ever see the movie Matrix? I digress. So now we can look at, I'll make the connection here, because when your cells or receptors are hijacked, they don't work properly, your semiconductors inside of you are not working with nature, you can't create amino acids in combinations, you can't make enzymes and hormones in combinations that your body requires for life, vibrant health, because those cellular receptors are corrupted. They're hijacked, and there's no way on this planet that it'll work right as long as your body is saturated with these metals and pathogens and parasites. Can't happen. And then you want to know why people have cholesterol problems, prostate problems, dementia, and all these other things? So hopefully your people will get the recording and listen to this a couple times, because we're going over this quite fast. Was that a big enough rock in the water for you, Patrick?
I got the bilge pumps running.
Well, I got my boogie board and I'm paddling.
So the reason I asked about your uncle, and I'm going to ask again, how would he know what direction to dig in? I'm assuming these were the days before technology. Was he following his nose?
I would not put that as, I wouldn't discount that. It wouldn't surprise me. I haven't really talked to him about it. I mean, he's in his 80s, and I didn't, there's just little bitty things when you're a kid and young that you just kind of record and you go back to them later, and that was one of the things.
Yeah, because in these modern days, they now have sniffers. Just like, you go to an airport and they stick the wand in your tennis shoes kind of thing. They have electronic sniffers for specific bacteria. Just like you said, where they sample a plot of ground. And here's the thing, folks. I've actually seen this in old-time pharmacies, if it's a generational pharmacy, not the corner shopping mall kind of thing. They used to have jars in their apothecary full of really weird stuff, and including, toxic things like mercury. One of them was Mumia, M-U-M-M-I-A. If you start looking into it through public television documentaries on just, the era of, I think it was around the 1800s, and any documentaries on Egypt, etc., you'll find out that they were raiding these tombs. Yeah, they were grabbing all the jewelry and all expensive stuff, but they were actually grabbing the bodies, and they were grinding them up to give to rich people who would then consume them, because the legend was that the pharaohs and the rulers of, I guess the middle management of Egypt were consuming these monatomic metals, just like Dr. No was saying. And the best way for idiots in that age to get them into their bodies was not to learn the alchemy and make it themselves, but to eat the mummies that had it already incorporated into their tissue.
Was that eating them for dessert or the main course?
I need oxygen, man.
Okay, man, since you did the mummies, then I have to do this. Do you remember how Yukon Cornelius prospected for gold in Rudolph and the Red-Nosed Reindeer? He would toss his pickaxe up in the air and then sniff it and taste it.
Get out of here. I gotta take notes, man.
Oh, you gotta expand on that one. Please, pretty please.
You want me to expand on a claymation Christmas special from the 70s? Okay. The Bumble, which was the Abominable Snowman, and Yukon Cornelius, both of which plush toys sit on my mantle during the festive holiday season, because the Bumble goes with my skull Christmas tree. Lest I digress, one of the characters in Rudolph and the Red-Nosed Reindeer, since they were in the North Pole, supposedly, was a gold prospector, and his name was Yukon Cornelius, and he always walked around with a pickaxe, and he was always sniffing for gold, and he would throw his pickaxe up in the air, and it would land stuck in the ground, and then he would pick it up and sniff it and lick it.
Wow, I don't know if I've ever seen that show.
I think I've seen the claymation. I have no memory of that whatsoever, but I can actually picture it in my mind as if I had seen it. And I'm telling you right now, that was not a show for kids. That was an Illuminati documentary.
Isn't anything and everything on the electric toilet a directed propagandic storm? Really?
None of this stuff is rehearsed. I would never in a million years just imagine that we would be talking about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in conjunction with Solomon's Mine, in conjunction with the total enslavement of a planet with monatomic gold, man.
What do you...
Mind-blowing.
What do you think I'm laughing at, man? I'm trying to figure out whether we hit an all-time low or have launched ourselves, beyond space.
What's the difference?
I think it's one of those things where, if you travel far enough, you finally meet yourself. I think we made it to infinity and beyond, man.
Okay, Buzz Jordan. We got to bring Walt Disney in here. Why not?
Oh, man. This is out of control.
I study ancient esoteric documents, ancient dead languages, and claymation Christmas specials for all of my Gnostic needs.
If the shoe fits, why not put it on?
We need somebody to call in for a reading. Tell them to lick their pickaxe.
Was that before they hit themselves on the tongue with it or after?
Oh, man.
I would now like to read from the great book of the Christmas that almost wasn't, chapter 12, verses 9 through 6. I am Mr. Snow Miser. I am Mr. Freeze.
Marination time, kids.
I want to be serious, but I can't.
Actually, what's happening is all this gold-infused cholesterol is blocking the oxygen flow to my brain, thus rendering me indigo and giving me this heightened sense of awareness to the cartoons of my youth.
Is that why they need antioxidants, to make them indigo?
It's either that or mess with the metabolism of cholesterol so they actually create more unhealthy cells so they can then continue to feed the pathogens within. Because isn't that what pathogens live in, is an anti-oxygen environment?
So I would like to back up for just a moment where you were talking about susceptibility to frequency. And we don't need, like, AM radio stations broadcasting at 50,000 watts. The RF as, part of a control mechanism. You've got things like the Taos hum in Taos, New Mexico, Taos. You've got, the Navy's low-frequency antenna. You've got HARP that can be modulated for low-frequency entrainment. There are so many things that could interface with these metal pollutions that they wouldn't have to be something obvious, like a radio station to broadcast a cell tower. It could be old technology, because, Will, you're going back to the 1950s with the USDA. I don't know when the Navy put in their ELF antenna. But
in the 40s. In the 40s, just to let you know, I lived a half a mile away from the Navy's ultra-low frequency station in northern Minnesota for their submarine communication system from the 40s. That's how old this is.
So they could have been, and see, I've got a point that I'm working up towards, is, except for rich people in the 1800s eating ground up mummy dust, how else are you going to get these exotic metals into people and exert control? Well before radio frequency saturation. That's why I was talking about low frequency. I had a crown, past tense, had a crown on a tooth. It was the expensive kind of crown, where they took gold, platinum, palladium, and silver, and nickel. And they made the crown out of that. And, when the dentist explained it to me, oh yeah, these are all inert in your mouth. They won't leach, they won't leak. It's all good and it's all safe. Come to find out, when you look into metal refineries and manufacturers of what's called transition metals, and that's the word you're looking for when you're talking about be ruthenium, palladium, silver, cadmium, and then below that on the chart is iridium, platinum, gold, and mercury. These are all transition metals. And they're all freaking toxic, man. there are warnings of people that produce ruthenium and rubidium, palladium. And palladium, by the way, this is my point that I'm trying to make. Palladium was part of the alloy of that crown that was in my mouth. They say, don't even touch the stuff. So, if you were to go to, let's say, a coin shop or something, and you had like a palladium coin, a plug or, a blank made out of ruthenium or rubidium. Is it ruthenium? Wait a minute. Rhodium. I'm sorry. I kept saying the wrong one. Rhodium. Ruthenium and rhodium. They're toxic to the touch. Now, see, the reason that I'm getting all bent out of shape is everybody doesn't label quite exactly what they're putting into stuff. So there's a fellow named Deagle that likes to make monatomic potions. And if memory serves, we'll have to look up his little formulae. I think that he had monatomic ruthenium, maybe some monatomic iridium in it, along with the monatomic gold. What are these things doing in your cells? Because they advertise, oh yeah, it'll like go right through your cell structure and attach to your nucleic material, and it'll make you like a super spiritual person. So the point that I'm trying to make, and it's a long road to get there, is long before you had all these exotic metals that people were clamoring to buy and poison themselves with to be affected by radio frequency, there was ELF and people with crowns in their mouths leaching these toxic transition metals 24 hours a day into their system, connected to the nervous system in their head, for goodness sakes, that could be affected by ELF.
Now, isn't it also interesting to note that your teeth are the receptors for the meridians that control your circadian rhythm? You have...
Hold on to your circadian rhythm there, Dr. Noel. We'll be right back. Oh, welcome back. How the time flies when we're having fun. This is an alternate perspective with me, Will, and Patrick and Dr. Noel. We were dancing around the mulberry bush here, beating it pretty good with some facts. And Dr. Noel was talking right before the break. Would you like to kind of repeat just a little bit, because the music kind of interrupted the flow there, Dr. Noel?
Yeah, Patrick was speaking of his exotic metal cocktail tooth filling, and I thought it would be interesting to bring out the fact that the teeth, the roots of your teeth, are the antenna for the EMF field of the planet, and that's what regulates your circadian rhythm or your biological clock. In conjunction with that, you have significantly greater densities of nerve endings and blood vessels in your palate and your mandibula, and you also have the resonance through the bone to your oral cavity. And so those three things seem to be the three deciding factors way back when in the 40s and 50s that they started experimenting with putting radio receivers in people's teeth to have them receive radio signals and hear them in their ears without having to wear any external gear. And since we went to as far as Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, I believe it wasn't Weird Science. It was a movie with Val Kilmer, where he was in college and he was like in a genius school, and they do exactly that to one of the kids in the school, and they have God talking to him through the entire movie.
They did that on Gilligan's Island, too, because there was a series, I remember this, watching Gilligan's Island, and he was picking up radio, Gilligan was, because he had these fillings in his mouth, and he had hit his head or something, and he was picking up radio stations, and they were trying to radio the rest of the world to tell them through Gilligan's mouth, the professor had come up with some bamboo whatever, trying to radio back through, backfeed out through Gilligan's head because of his fillings.
But this gets better.
Oh, good.
The plot of this particular movie is that the Department of Defense is paying under the table the professor of the physics department to get his class to develop the Star Wars SDI laser system without anybody knowing. So the kids of good moral character, way back when Val Kilmer was a youth, rebel against the teacher when they find this out, and that's why they rig his little lackey with the voice transceiver in his tooth, and they subsequently sabotage the mirror and the laser and the gyroscope system that create the reflector for the SDI airplane.
All right, Giggles. Come on now. Giggles. What's going on over there?
This is reality, man. Gilligan's freaking Island.
It can't be any better than Gilligan's Island and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer for a reality check.
And the Val Kilmer movie was Real Genius, 1985.
There we go. So segue and wrap it all together, Mr. Green Ghetto Giggler.
I can't, man, because you already done it. Never in a million years would I have thought you'd bring up Gilligan's Island that I remember as if I saw it yesterday.
I do, too.
Which of course begs the long-term, Zen Cohen of Gilligan's Island. For all the crap the professor could do with a coconut, he couldn't fix a hole in a boat.
That's because he was industrially educated. So that means, retarded people can't think logically.
I'm starting to beginning to think there may be a gas leak in Patrick's house. I don't really think we're being this funny.
No, I think it's the propane fumes.
It's life, man. I mean, come on. You either got to cry or you got to laugh because life is so absurd that we can, expose a planetary conspiracy in two children's television shows.
Well, I look at it this way. After a few 10,000 years of clay tablets and cuneiform and hieroglyphs and papyruses and hiding parchments and clay jars, I mean, these guys had to get a little bored and sort of at a loss for the dissemination of information, because remember, rule number 1 is they must tell you exactly what they're going to do. Rule number 2 is you must come of your own free will and accord. I mean, so yeah, man, we have Val Kilmer, we have Real Genius, we have Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the entire concept of Satan Claus, and now we have Gigglin' Island over here with Mr. Jordan.
And then you have the willful consent of getting semiconductor components put into your mouth, into your body through injections, into your body through supplementation, through the alternate health world, through the food chain in all different facets.
And I mentioned that woman who was the head of DARPA, who is now the head of R&D for Google, who has the circuit board tattooed on her arm. We just talked about this Monday. Has the circuit board tattooed on her arm that's powered by this little capsule potassium, whatever, pill that she eats in the morning and fires this thing up. We have Ray Kurzweil, who we won't even go there with that boy. Yeah, I mean, we drink it, we eat it, we have it tattooed on us, we, cell phones, name it.
Smart meters. We also create it in our own body through our piezoelectric system. And when your system is overcome with the metals, what are you actually doing? When you have these auto-manufactured stuff inside of us, and here we bring in Morgellons and other nanotechnologies.
Now, I want to go on record here as bringing another child's fable into this conversation, but it is for the purposes of our material well-being. Mr. Patrick Jordan, could you please spend an hour or two sometime this week trying to figure out what diet the goose that laid the golden eggs was on? Because I think potentially there may be another Illuminati message hidden somewhere.
Oh. Taking notice, man. That was sobering.
Yeah, see, this is the reality that we live in.
Wait. Gilligan was funny. Rudolph was funny. But Jack and the Beanstalk is now sobering? Is this some air of credibility that the other two references didn't have?
It's just my greed showing because Rudolph, that's just kind of like Fantasyland. Gilligan's Island, that's it's just
it's the Malaysian. It's the Malaysia flight over at Gilligan's Island. The Malaysia flight. Okay, gotta put those two together.
But geese, man, me and Will are farm boys. It's like, wait a minute, you're talking feed? You're talking livestock? I want to get in on this golden egg thing, man.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of little probiotics do we have to give ourselves so that we can, be our own geese?
And you see, that's the scary thing that Will had brought up in the first hour is once these metals are in, they're actually attractive to microbes. And see, microbes, if they've got like an outer shell, if they're like an M&M with a hard coating on it, they can't get into your cells. But that's the beauty of antibiotics, and that's why people with Lyme are given antibiotics, because then they are mutated into a cell wall deficient L form that can now travel in between your cells and get inside of your cells. And now if your cells are all polluted with these metals, what are these critters eating?
Well, I don't know, but I also find it significantly interesting that as part of the formal introduction that I penned for Dr. Spencer and yourself, I refer to Will as Woo-Woo Will Wonka Spencer, and if I remember correctly, both the Johnny Depp version and the Gene Wilder version had a room full of geese that laid golden eggs, subsequently making me think there may be another method there as to some sort of dietary golbiotic little critter that we can eat to defecate our way to fame and fortune.
That all depends if you consider Hershey's equal to Wonka. So we're crossing over from the Hollywood version to the Pennsylvania version.
And they don't call it Hershey Squirts for no reason.
That's right.
Come on, you Mr. Wizard, science genius microbiologists here. We're on the edge of wealth beyond our wildest dreams of avarice.
I know, man, because There's something big here, but right now I have to apologize to everybody. My mind is kind of frozen. Once you mentioned Johnny Depp, it's like he was so creepy, man. I couldn't even stand to watch that movie.
Well, if you ever read the book is even darker than the Johnny Depp movie. The Gene Wilder. Yeah, the Gene Wilder version that we grew up with was like Rodgers and Hammerstein on acid when they read that book.
Right.
But the book is actually darker than the Depp version.
I think that's the place to start then. You know, they do video documentaries as we have outlined so far, but like Frank Baum, the guy that wrote the trilogy, by the way, of the Oz series. Some of those books were just so incredibly dark, you just can't imagine.
So here's another shade of darkness. Kind of indigo colored. Antioxidant, maybe. So on Plum Island, they were figuring this out in the 50s. What components to feed to the animals to get certain viruses and pathogens to actually be drawn in and considered in the body, so the body would like draw them in. So you spray them, or you have a tick, or you have some other delivery mechanism. At the same time, you're putting these elements into the food chain of the animal. And then they monitored this. So it doesn't surprise me that there's certain dietary pushes, fads, if you will, F-A-D, fads, that are going around. They keep cycling, and they're cycling faster since the 70s, to keep something in front of you, so then sooner or later you will try that, which then will set you up to be a magnet for the pathogen to consider your animal body home. And then, here's what we have. We have a massive population that are overloaded with these pathogens and metals and components through the food chains. Multiple types of different fad diets and dietary choices. Because nowadays, look at all the delivery systems. We have pesticides that are used on cotton and on flax and on all these other different crops that are actually clothing fibers. And these residues continue on into the cloth that the clothes are made out of, and your skin absorbs them. I mean, here's a sobering little thing here.
So expand on that for the non-farm people. Well,
for the non-farm people.
I thought you just ate the seed. You know.
No, well,
clothing?
Yeah, clothing. Fine linen comes from flax. The plant, just like they do hemp, makes canvas and other material, rope, and so forth. Linen actually comes from flax. And we have, this stuff touches our body, and cotton is one of them, and this comes out right straight out of the 50s. This is one of the biological warfare agents, as well as chemical warfare agents through cotton. These pathogens and chemical compounds manage to get their way just naturally into the plant fibers, the cotton ball, because that's one way the plant gets rid of the toxins, is to put it into the whatever's going to be extracted away from the plant into its baby. A fetus is a detox pathway, just like a seed is a detox pathway. Same thing. Different species, same thing.
Hey, who remembers the good old days of real cotton canvas Levi jeans? When we used to get the jeans and they were as stiff as cardboard, we would put them on and soak in the bathtub in as hot a water possible for as long as possible in order to get the jeans to break and to contour to your body. And the wonderful side result was you looked like a Smurf from the waist down for like 3 days until the dye worked its way through your system.
And most of the dye is actually coal tar. Comes from the earth.
In the mordant, it has mercury as part of the system to deliver it to the fiber. Wow, man.
It's wave 1 of the indigos. I was being funny there, but... So we have these delivery mechanisms, pathways, to get all this industrial waste garbage into the body to clog up all the cell receptors, so then the body is then further disconnected from nature. You see, that's why I'm an advocate for nature. Everything I do is based on that philosophy, and we are vibrant, health-creating machines. We live in them. Our meat suit is a fabulous machine, only when it lives in a natural, the connection to nature. When it's connected through all this industrial waste stuff into the industrial system, it is not a vibrant health machine. It's a disease-creating machine. And pain and suffering is your outcome. So that's why you have to really ask. You have to really ask yourself, these so-called natural health stuff, this supplementation, these dietary choices, are they really for the perpetuation of vibrant health, or are they there created to make you industrial fodder for the machine? There's your delineation. There's your line in the sand. I just drew it for you. Which side are you going to be on? We are designed for eons to live in harmony with nature. From a cellular level, fractaled out to the universal level. And we don't have very good odds at achieving that today unless you're doing some things very creatively. And just frankly, I've spent most of my life so far to get back into that natural state, because that's the only place that vibrant health is kept. So there's something sobering. Unless you don't want to be sober, which then we can, keep on continuing down this path, because this affects all of us listening here, all of us talking here, because we're being... Oh, go ahead, Dr. No.
No, that's okay. Finish up.
Because we're being bombarded on every single level from the industrial world to clog these cell receptors and to hijack our gene expression and to force feed us trash to keep us from getting back to what's natural and to be living to perpetuate the natural life. So now I'm finished, so go right ahead.
It harkens me back to one of my favorite quotes from the book, The Biology of Aggression, page 8. Page 8. Quote, "Individuals are manifestations of the power wielded by replicators over the world in which they live," writes Dawkins. "We and our societies may be but byproducts of selection for replicators with the power to manipulate their world. Who or what has been adapted. Chew on that one.
Not only chew on it, but get right in the tub and bathe with this.
They pretty much told you on page 8 that the odds are that you are nothing but a mobile artificial environment for a parasite.
And the next 650 pages tells the rest of the story.
And they specifically used the word replicators, which is the Gnostic term for them.
That's why I was holy crapping, man. I'm sure if the marinator was listening, if he was doing anything like eating or drinking, I hope he don't need CPR, man, because I about choked on my teeth. That's astounding. I've read this book cover to cover, and I did not pick up on that.
How would you? Because it's in the beginning. Nobody gives that kind of information in the beginning of the book. It's usually at the end of the book. They're like in your face page. The first chapter, the first 15 pages of that book is like so in your face. And people have the disconnection of in your face. Because they're so used to reading and watching fiction.
So isn't it interesting, once again, how, well, Patrick and I probably more so than Will, we're most oft criticized for our anger or our aggression, when the fact remains that the entire 780 pages of that book were dedicated to the fact that, and it's stated point blank in the second chapter, that the study was put together for the control of human aggression, and basically speaking, because the realization was made that the best way to combat some of these forms of mind control is through anger and aggression.
Are we back?
We're back.
I took my headset off, and time flies when you're having fun, I'm telling you.
It is also interesting to note, to finish up on that thing from before the break, page 19, that the exposition of the aggressive behavior was politically touted in the 60s on a platform of the problem of violence. So they substituted the word violence for aggression, and violence and aggression are two distinctly different things. However, they pushed this political agenda in 1965, and they called it the XYY syndrome, okay? And this led to the need for what one group called applied research aiming at curbing unnecessary and excessive violence. Well, they thus formed the International Society for Research on Aggression, whose was founded in their mission statement for the purpose of encouraging the discussion and exchange of scientific information regarding the causes and consequences of aggression, considered in both its useful and harmful aspects, and for the development of knowledge and techniques which may reduce the latter. It should be noted in passing, in complete conformity with these aims, the program for this Advanced Study Institute includes a roundtable session on human aggression and its control. So, yes, they actually have a worldwide institute that was formally founded in 1965 to actually research all these wonderful things.
So this isn't anything new, accidental, or oops, this just fell out of the sky and got delivered by ETs.
NATO. The book was published by the NATO Advanced Study Institute series. That would be the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That would be the combined militaries of all the Western Bloc nations.
Planetary, military, occupation. Sometimes you just have to make up words when they're not there. I learned that from Judy Wood, the woman that did Where Did the Towers Go? She had to make up words for what happened to the buildings, like dustification, because there were no descriptive adjectives in science to describe an exotic weapon basically vaporizing a metal and stone structure.
Okay, Patrick, I believe you were correct, and I believe we rattled the masochist's cage.
Oh.
From the chat room. Okay, Dr. Wil, you say everything is about balance. Is your show balanced? Question mark. Perhaps sharing how the listeners can deal with the environment and balance their internal terrain may be helpful.
I'll make a quick statement to bring balance, and then I have another shoe to throw into the pile. Okay, it's very easy. That is, you go to my website, and you click on GSR hand scanner, you get a scan, and you follow the protocol. There's the balance. Okay? It all comes back to that. That's my short version of bringing balance. Because I use this show not as a sales pitch for what I do or what we have, but to share information with you so then it will spark you to look into what I'm doing. Okay, that's one thing that I do not like to be selling. But at the same time, that's what I do, and I found this to be so balanced that we're talking about a 14-ton object to bring equilibrium here. It's that huge, all built into one simple thing. So there you go, Mr. Marinator. And now I want to really get a bigger rock and throw it into the water here again, because this brings us into today. This isn't pie in the sky. This isn't woo-woo fairyland or the Hershey squirts. And this topic is Roundup, the literal biological chemical warfare agent that is in our food chain, that is in our yards, if you live in town, being sprayed by the millions of gallons all over the planet and of the NATO countries. And I just lost my link I wanted to look at here real quick. Where did it go? Because the active ingredient in Roundup is glyphosate. Glyphosate is known as a heavy chelator. It's kind of like the metal we were talking about earlier. It clogs the receptors. It actually stops the body from having access to calcium, copper, iron, magnesium, zinc, selenium, manganese, magnesium, phosphorus. The main one, though, is manganese. It actually stimulates pathogenic growth. And coupled with that, they usually use Roundup on, get this, here we go, ready? Corn, soybeans, alfalfa, sugar beets. Those are the main crops. Y'all need to watch the movie King Corn. There is so much corn in people's bodies that it would just be, it's unforgivable. How about cotton? How about Quaker oats? How about organic oats? I know personally a gentleman that raises a couple hundred acres of oats every year. He's got an organic contract. He uses Roundup to kill the oats so the whole field he can combine it at the same time. And it gets sold under organic certified. Minnesota. Gets sold right down there through St. Paul. South St. Paul. So don't forget to eat your oatmeal and get your daily dose of glyphosate. And then these plants have been genetically modified to have the Bacillus thuringiensis. I murder that every time. Patrick says it so much better than me. This is a bacteria that produces the toxins that are supposed to punch holes in a cutworm so it can't live. But now I'm finding these bacteria in people's bodies, and they wonder why they have leaky gut, why they have cancer, why they have digestive irritable bowel, diverticulitis, diverticulosis, why they have autoimmune disorders, like a lot of them. So I'm bridging the gap with a little sewing needle here, maybe, between the heavy metals and these petrochemicals that are known pesticides and also chelators, because when these things get into our body, they stop our body from having free access to the minerals needed. At the same time, are loaded with metals, so these receptors are being hijacked, and our gene expressions are being altered mechanically on a microscopic level below your perception and ability to see with your naked eye. And this stuff doesn't break down. The Roundup chemical composition itself may break down, but the elements used to make up the compound of Roundup does not break down, and most of it has a minimum of a half-life of 22 years. Hello, I said 22 years of a half-life. So 22 times 2 is 44. And now we have a huge, massive amount of organic land in this country being farmed on the same land that Roundup was being sprayed on since the 70s. And then we think we're having organic food. And you're wondering why illness only goes away a little bit when you go to organic? Do you see the deception here? I do. Do you see how the cell receptors get clogged up with other stuff other than just metals? And we wonder why we have thyroid problems at all-time high, and we wonder why we have all these other problems at all-time highs. Maybe because your neighbor's shooting Roundup on his dandelions in his front yard. And then your dog goes over there, or your kids, and then comes home and delivers the Roundup to your carpet, which you vacuum up and then atomize into your house to breathe in. See, the delivery mechanisms here are pretty broad. Or you could be drinking some milk, almond milk, or cow milk, because almonds are some of the most highly polluted seeds, nuts there are. Just visit any almond grove in California or a pecan grove in Georgia.
Let us also not forget that binding to cell receptors is one of the more common mechanisms that the pharmacological industrial complex uses with their psychotropic drugs that they like to give out like candy.
Can I hear a hearty amen from anybody? We want to talk about sobering conversation. So I can say, to bring balance to the conversation, that the remediation of the cell receptors of these toxic things, that's all built into what we do, if you choose to work with us. I can't promise you it's a bed of roses and it's an easy trip, because it's usually not. Because we are so polluted, and I include myself in on this too, I'm not singling anybody out, living in the NATO countries, we are so polluted on a cellular level, it's amazing we're even alive. That's the fantasticness of living in these bodies, because these bodies have the ability to overcome and adapt much better than any Marine. We have systems and subsystems and subsystems in our bodies that are fantastic. And I will tell you, the military occupation knows this, has figured this out, and that's why the system keeps information withheld. Because then we become empowered. And the kind of empowerment that I live in is I don't have to worry about the contamination that's out there, because I know the inside of my body and this meat suit that I'm living in has the ability and the tools to overcome and adapt their crap and live a semi-vibrant life in this chemical, GMO'd, polluted environment. So how's that, Marinator? There's some balance. And you have to really get that. You really have to get the negative side of what we talk about week after week after week here. Because we're talking fact-based, even though we're talking Gilligan's Island. These are things flat in your face, like a bolt oar, clunk to the side of your head.
As happenstance would be, for some reason, in the past few days, I stumbled across a documentary about the ecosystem of Chernobyl, and specifically it was a study of the population of the proliferation of the wolf species in the aftermath of the Chernobyl nuclear accident. And I mean, you can search it on YouTube. But the point of it is this: if you think about the not just generations of natural evolution, environmental changes, planetary changes, toss into it the man-made, purposeful / accidental, radical, toxic environmental manipulations, it is a testament not just to us as a species, but to the entire ecosystem of the planet as such, that our gene expressions have remained as intact as they are. And this is part of the problem with the powers that be, is that affecting long-term permanent changes to the genome has not been something they are very successful at. And in fact, they were steering their efforts away from that and steering their efforts more towards, we were talking about a few shows ago, the artificial creation of life, the actual, they're self-assembling their own DNA and chromosomes to create species that Mother Nature never created, because if you do look at it, as much damage as they have done, they have not been successful at altering the long-term permanent DNA expression of us as a species. There is something in us that no matter how damaged we get, no matter what the immediate effects are, the mutations and whatever, overall, our DNA remains intact.
It remains intact, but it also will be able to give us a much better, more healthy gene expression the further away from the industrialization you get.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's definitely being altered, but my point is what you were saying is the ability to bioremediate ourselves. You know, when forced to live in a toxic environment, yeah, there are the mutations, there are the tumors, there are the frogs with 6 eyes, 4 legs, and, you know, humps on their back. Okay, but they're the rarity. They're the, you know, their nature's way of figuring out what bioremediation needs to be done. And the fact remains is that is not the gene expression that proliferates. What proliferates is the quote-unquote normal frog who is now somewhat more resistant to that same toxin.
It's the caterpillar that's now eating GMO corn. Is what you're saying. It's still a caterpillar, but like Will cited the Marine motto, it improvised, adapted, and overcame.
Absolutely, and it's, you know, we talked about the caterpillar. There's you know, some life forms are more fragile than others, and it's like I'm thinking of the honeybees. The honeybees are being decimated to the point where they're having problems just in numbers replicating and overcoming whatever toxins they're facing that's decimating the populations. So extinction absolutely is one of the potential byproducts of the toxicity that we live in. But, you know, short of extinction, you know, we read on a fairly regular basis of a critter here and there. You know, this thing is now resistant to Roundup. That thing is now resistant to this. This is resistant to radiation. This thing eats plastic. You know, Mother Nature's adapting left and right faster than they can devolve.
And so your point, your overarching point is actually in one sentence before the paragraph that you read on page 8, and it goes like this. We know conscious man to be too malleable, which means, you know, you can bend and mold, and his culture is too diverse for rigid biological determinism to be a rule. And what I interpret that to be, you know, in context, it means what they kind of like want you to believe it to mean. But the way I interpret that is, crap, we can't control the lab animals. They're too adaptable. And what you had just got done saying is they, you know, because this was published in 1981. They've had since then to realize no matter what we spray these cockroach humans with, they just keep popping back up. So the only, and then you brought up the replicators, man. The only solution of an artificial control mechanism would be not to work with the organic that can adapt and overcome, but then to create something completely controllable that is completely artificial. So we're back into the archons, we're back into the simulation.
We have a statement in the chat room. I know we only got a couple minutes left. Says, do you guys think viruses and bacteria are also conscious on some level, that they wouldn't just blast their own food supply to extinction of everything? Ooh, see this? You should not say statements like that 3 minutes before the end of the show. Because now we have a topic now for next week, because we talk about this a lot, about the pathogens and parasites having their own consciousness and actually, like a puppet's handler, remote controls the whole body.
So
Well, this basically goes.
A person that commented, just type into search engine quorum sensing, Quorum sensing, and you'll find out just what these little single cells can do once they start talking to each other.
Not only talking to each other, but once their consciousness is oozing out of the meat suit that we live in as the louder consciousness.
And it ties into what Patrick just said to wrap it up, is having been unsuccessful at altering our DNA for us to do what they want, they're creating instead inside of us an ecosystem whereby...
Uh-oh. Are we here?
I can hear you, Will. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Dr. Noah just disappeared.
Yeah, he was in the middle of a statement, and he just, satellited off.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm like, right there, climaxed and got slapped in the face. You got to do that. You got to do that again. We got 1 minute left of the show too.
I said to wrap it up, having been unsuccessful at permanently altering our DNA to turn us into whatever they would like to turn us into, the next best method of control was, like you said about Plum Island, is how to create an internal environment that specifically sustains a parasitic, bacterial, pathogenic life form that has a consciousness that can control the host.
I know. You feed them all soybeans, both your pets and the human beings, so that they can all host the same bugs at the same time.
And you wash it down with almond milk. Oh, and a little bit of coconut oil.
And let us
Make
not
sure
forget
the almond
corn.
milk comes in a steri pack that has an aluminum lining and has been irradiated with gamma rays.
Let us not forget the corn.
Corn. So, anyhow, we're at the end of the show. Please come back next week for more insanity or reality, whatever you pick to choose to view it as. An alternate perspective with Patrick Jordan, vaccinefraud.com, Dr. Noah, who doesn't have a website, and me, Will, bodyelectrician.com.
Dr. Howell.
Dr. Howell. All right. Have an awesome week. Thank you for being here, everyone.